this video today, I'm doing a first impression and several tests using these erasable colored pencils in mixed media artwork. First, I need to open the package. It comes with this extra pencil sharpener, which I think I'll just keep in my purse for travel. And here are the pencils themselves and the back of the box. And now we're going to take our first look. The tips of the pencils are not perfectly pointed sharp, which is a bad sign. However, I'm going to sharpen them to see. We should still do a first test on the sharpener to see how well it works. I'm noticing that the barrels of these pencils are extraordinarily slippery and hard to hold, which is a problem. When I went aside and used my electric sharpener, they were really hard to hold. They were extremely slippery, even more than the average pencil. It's actually really weird how slippery and hard they are to hold. It's hard to turn them and hard to sharpen, and less comfortable to draw with. And I haven't even drawn. I had to hold them like this in order to push them into my sharpener, which isn't normal. As I try to draw with them for the first time, I discover they're incredibly dry and scratchy. As I go along in this process, I unfortunately discover that they do not hold pointed tips correctly and crumble and break. Once the tip breaks down a little bit, they seem to work fine, but they are not at all pleasant to draw with. Not only is the barrel the slipperiest I've ever felt in my life, which makes it hard to hold and draw with them, but they are incredibly dry and rough, more of the texture of a chalk, and unpleasant to draw with. In fact, it's scratchier and less pleasant to draw with than your standard graphite pencil and doesn't feel smooth or buttery on any level. And unfortunately, it actually slowed down my drawing time and made the entire process less pleasant. I would say these are some of the most unpleasant colored pencils I've ever had the displeasure of trying to draw or sketch with. In a little while, I'm going to pull out my Crayola Erase pencils. And once I do, I realize just how superior the Crayola Erase are and how much more pleasant they are to use. The one major benefit of these pencils, their saving grace I suppose, is that they are actually extremely erasable. They're even more erasable than the Crayola Erase, as you'll see when I do a comparison test. They erase completely, but they are extremely unpleasant to draw with. They shatter easily, they're hard to sharpen, they're hard to hold, and the physical drawing experience of pulling them across the page is incredibly unpleasant, at least to me personally. So overall, already, I really can't recommend buying them. Even though they are an extremely low price and I got them on sale for only around $2, I would still spend much more money and go for the Crayola Erase pencils. Later on in the video, I'm going to pull out a third surprise pencil option to do a third comparison. But for now, I'm just doing some sketching with these pencils by using different colors as a base. As I said, I'm going to compare with mixed media artwork, so I'm going to pull out some different artwork. I'm testing on the tanned craft paper here, which is a very smooth paper and easy to erase on. These pencils are much more pleasant to use on the smoother surface of this paper versus the slightly rougher surface of the other sketchbook I had been using. However, they are still far more unpleasant in my hands and the feeling of pulling them across the paper than any other color pencil I'd ever used. And personally, at least, I find it an unpleasant sensory experience. I just really can't recommend it to anyone who might be bothered by that, and I found it actually slowed down my art process. Once I pulled out the Crayola Erase, I could really see the difference side by side. But for now, let's test some layers with some Copic marker. Using Copic marker over them, I'm checking how much, or if at all, they dissolve in the alcohol. And I'm also checking if they dissolve or wipe away at all with water. They slightly resist the water at first and then break down and actually get pulled up and destroyed by water, which is interesting, but it seems to do it in a way that I actually find visually unpleasant, not the way I'd normally go. That paper isn't made for water though, so part of the problem could be the paper as well. Everything works differently on different papers. So there might be a type of paper that works better with these pencils, but in general I'm finding them particularly unpleasant, and as I said, I'm probably not going to use them again after this, except if people want me to do an art challenge, and if you really want me to do some sort of challenge with these pencils, or any other sort of art challenge, you can leave that in the comment section below. I'm using different types of paints, watercolors and gouache. I like to mix watercolor and gouache together and work in particular ways. I have different techniques I've developed for different types of paper, particularly paper that's actually not intended to have watercolor on it. And for example, this is a paper that's not really intended for watercolor, but I love to use watercolor and gouache on it anyway, and I find it works great, especially with the way I paint. As I would be using erasable colored pencils as a base layer and not as anything for the final layer of artwork, that's why I'm doing the tests the way I'm doing them. It's only supposed to be something I'm sketching with and then I'm working over with other mediums. One of the other huge downsides of the Crayola version, the ones I'm testing here, is that they're extremely pale. Too pale. They're so pale to the point where you have to push a little harder just to get out enough pigment to be able to see it properly. This is bad because it can dent into the paper, which can cause problems. If you've had to push hard enough to be able to see it, that you've caused permanent scratching into the surface of the paper, when you erase it, there'll still be a dent in the paper left, which seems to be a risk with these sort of ones. Also, it causes more wrist strain to push harder. Oddly, I decided to test if I could erase the fully dried watercolor, the pencil underneath. Almost never can you erase anything underneath a layer of watercolor. However, these Crayola erasables could be partially erased, but not evenly and not completely, through the watercolor. I've never seen that before. It's very interesting. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it would be better if they would act like a normal pencil and not erase when overlaid by watercolor. Here I'm comparing similar colors in the Crayola Erasable and Kohl Erase. As you can see, the Kohl Erase is superior in every way. The barrel of the Kohl Erase is actually hexagonal. It has some flat surfaces around and is really easy to grip. It's really easy on the hand and arm. It's not incredibly slippery and it's really comfortable. It's smooth and buttery and not at all scratchy, but it's not so soft that it breaks the tip off a lot. Kohl Erases, in fact, are incredibly good for sharpening. They're vibrant and vivid and smooth and easy to use. Comparing these two side by side, I realized I wasn't crazy. The Crayola pencils are terrible to use. They're so rough and scratchy that I guess I'm almost tempting you to buy them just to see how bad they are. I'm also really noticing that even on this cheap paper that's not meant for water, they really do dissolve in the water more, which could be a good thing if you want to erase the pencil lines by overlaying with watercolor, but could be a bad thing if you want to incorporate the pencil lines in the final artwork. When I sketch with Kohl Erase, I want to erase if I draw lightly, but I want to keep some of the pencil look in the final artwork. These aren't good for that. The real reason I use erasable colored pencils for sketching is for mixed media artwork, and I do want some of the colored pencil to show up in the final artwork. That makes Kohl Erase once again superior in every way, and much more worth your investment of time, effort, and money. In fact, I must just make this into an advertisement for Kohl Erase, which I found to be the superior pencil. I've always wanted to try the other brands of mechanical pencil colored, erasable colored pencils, but I haven't gotten around to them because they're always either sold out or too expensive where I live. But I really do appreciate my past self investing in the Kohl Erase pencils. I really still use them all the time and enjoy them for my mixed media artwork. In general, if the best thing that can be said about the Crayola Erasables is that they are actually fully erasable, it doesn't make up for all the downsides of the pencil, which I find incredibly unpleasant to use. I have to say that I really don't advise them, like I already said, but it does make me appreciate how superior my Kohl Erase pencils actually are when I can see them being used directly next to and compared with these horrible Crayola Erasables. Once again, if you have trouble with grip, or your hands or your wrists, I really can't advise the Crayola Erasables. Something about them is incredibly slippery and hard to grip. I really don't think it's just me. I almost want to see other people's reviews to see if other people have had this problem with them. I don't have this problem with any other colored pencils I own, and I own a lot of other brands. I have Faber-Castell Polychromos, I have Prismacolors, I have all kinds, and none of them feel this incredibly slippery problem that these Crayola pencils have. I'm even finding my old original Crayolas, I haven't gotten any other new ones recently, but my old ones don't feel like this, which I tested after doing the initial recording of this video. There's something strangely extra slippery about the cover of these pencils that it was a terrible, terrible design decision. I can't believe they made them this way. It's really bad. At any rate, Here I am using two different reference photos of macaws that I found, and in order to sketch side by side, and just the coal erase, I literally drew the whole thing faster and better and easier and enjoyed it. It was actually a big difference. I have to say, the quality of art supplies you use can really matter on actual functionality and enjoyment. You can give up on art if you use supplies that are so bad they don't give a good impression on the art, and you'll do less art if the supplies are uncomfortable or painful to use. I feel like if I only had these Crayola Erasable pencils as an option for colored pencils, I wouldn't do art in color. I'd just do stuff in pencil because that's how bad they are to use. Whereas if you get other colored pencils, you can see the difference. So the other thing I should say is that you can use any colored pencils to sketch with. You don't have to use erasable because some erasers can still partially erase a lot of different colored pencils. So feel free to use them to sketch with as well. I think you can add a lot of spice to your art by sketching in color, not always with pencil or black and white or things like that. So I really do advise trying to sketch with colored pencils. You can also use multiple colors in a sketch or just one to make it unified, like I showed in a couple examples here, and I find it really fun and helpful. You can sometimes spend a little too much time on the sketch if you're focused on using too many colors, but if it shows up in the final artwork, it might be worth your effort. Here I'm going over things in many layers. I'm using different types of fine liners, and I'm just checking if anything interacts weird with the pencils. And I did find a few things interacted weird in a way that was not a problem with coal erase. One of the biggest issues is that water dissolves it, but not in a way that I find pleasant. So for example, a water-soluble pencil, a regular water-soluble colored pencil, seems to work more evenly with water dissolving it. Whereas these, they sort of dissolve unevenly in a way that actually seems to cause problems. Because they don't completely evenly dissolve, I don't think they'd be as good for using intentionally to dissolve into things. So once again, they're bad at that too. Another thing I found is that they didn't seem to have any reaction to the alcohol. So they're really good to go over with alcohol markers like Copic or any other brand. They weirdly resist the water around them at first more than coal erase, which I really noticed here with this test. They break apart slightly, but at first they cause a slight resistance around the edge, and then they slightly dissolve, but unevenly. This is not a problem with coal erase. Coal erase is completely unaffected by the water and holds completely firm to the page. They're incredibly great to overlay with watercolors if you want to see the original sketch lines in the final watercolor piece. And a couple final tests and a couple final touch-ups on these little sketch paintings. Here I pull out my surprise, the Crazy Art Erasable pencils. I actually had them for a while and tried to use them in a video for an initial first impression review a long time ago, but things went wrong with the recording and I ended up giving up on it. I remembered about them partway through this process and decided it's the perfect time to bring them back out. So I brought them back out and I did some swatching and a few tests here. What I found with the tests was pretty interesting. The Crazy Art was about the same price as the Crayola. They were about $2. However, they were better than the Crayola Erasable in every way. They were, however, not as good as the coal erase. So they were exactly between the qualities of the coal erase and the Crayola Erasable. They were pleasant enough that I might consider using them again. The barrels were a little slipperier than the coal erase, but not this weird, overly slippery problem. There's no trouble with sharpening them or holding them compared to the Crayola. They don't erase as well as the Crayola does, but they erase about exactly equally with the coal erase. It's a little easier to draw with them than the Crayola, but not as smooth as the coal erase. But they do crumble on the tips a bit. Not quite as bad as the Crayola, but definitely a lot worse than anything that happens with the coal erase, so the tips do crumble and they cause a bit of dust, which is a bit of an issue. Sometimes cheap art supplies are great, and sometimes they're just cheap, sadly. Once again, that's all for this video. If you like my videos, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to all notifications so you will know when a new video comes up. I aim for new videos every Wednesday, but sometimes life happens and things are delayed. I hope that you enjoyed this video and will see you with another one very soon. Bye!